Picture a city at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Buses, pigeons, someone eating a sandwich wrong. The city is, by any reasonable metric, absolutely full of life. Thousands of people doing thousands of things, commerce happening, arguments happening. Someone somewhere is definitely on hold with their bank. Now picture the same city at 3 a.m. Almost no one. A taxi idling at a red light that doesn't need to be red. A fox, probably. The hum of something electrical that you never normally notice. And here's the thing. The 3 a.m. version feels more alive. Not louder, not busier, more alive. Like the city has exhaled and in doing so revealed something it keeps hidden during the day. You've felt this. Most people have. And most people, when pressed, can't explain why. They say things like it has a different energy or it just feels real somehow, and then trail off because they know that doesn't quite cover it. So what is actually happening? Why does the brain register absence as presence? Why does the city feel most like itself when it's most empty? The answer involves your nervous system, a fairly unsettling property of human consciousness, and possibly the entire reason cities were built in the first place. During the day, a city is producing somewhere between 70 and 85 decibels of ambient noise at any given point. That's the rough equivalent of a vacuum cleaner running constantly, everywhere, forever. You stop hearing it after about 11 minutes of exposure. Your brain decides it isn't information and files it under background. This is called auditory masking. Your ears are still receiving the signal. Your brain has simply decided it isn't worth reporting. At 3 a.m., the noise floor drops to somewhere around 40 decibels. Quiet suburb territory. And suddenly your auditory system starts receiving reports it hasn't heard in hours. A distant train, whined through a gap in a building. Your own footsteps, which have been happening all day but which you are now, for the first time, actually hearing. The city hasn't gotten louder. You have gotten more sensitive to it. The signal-to-noise ratio has flipped, and your brain, which evolved to treat contrast as information, interprets the new signals as meaningful, as significant, as alive. This is the first part of the answer, but it's the boring part, because that explains heightened perception. It doesn't explain why heightened perception feels like presence, like the city is watching you back. There's a concept in neuroscience called the default mode network. It's the set of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on a task, when your mind is, technically speaking, doing nothing. Resting. Idling. Here's what it's actually doing. It's running simulations, modeling other people's perspectives, rehearsing past interactions, constructing a narrative of who you are and what your life means. The default mode network is, in a very real sense, the machinery of your inner life. The thing that makes experience feel like experience rather than just a sequence of events. During the day, it's suppressed. You're busy. External demands keep pulling you into task-focused attention, answering emails, navigating crowds, deciding whether that bus is going to stop or isn't. The default mode gets switched off repeatedly, like an app running in the background that keeps getting closed. At 3 a.m., it runs unchecked. Your inner life fills the space that the city has vacated. And because your inner life is, by its nature, the most vivid thing you have access to, the world around you seems to acquire a vividness by association. The city feels alive partly because you feel more alive. The two things blur together in the dark. This is why people report that their best ideas come at 3 a.m. It's not that their thinking is better. It's that they're finally listening to it. The critic is quiet, the noise floor is down, the simulation runs clean. Which raises a fairly uncomfortable question. If the feeling of aliveness requires emptiness to emerge, what does that say about what the feeling actually is? Every culture that has ever existed has had a concept for the hours between midnight and dawn, not just a name for them, a theology. The Romans called it the hora incerta, the uncertain hour. Medieval Christians called 3 am the devil's hour, the inverse of the 3 p.m. of the crucifixion, a time when the veil between worlds was thin. Across West African spiritual traditions, the small hours are when the ancestors are closest. In Japanese folklore, the hour of the ox, roughly 2 a.m. to 4 am, is when ghosts walk most freely. These are not the same culture. They arrived at this independently. From different continents, different centuries, different metaphysical frameworks. They all landed on the same hour and decided something unusual was happening in it. You could read this as mass superstition. Humans afraid of the dark, projecting meaning onto an arbitrary point on the clock, and you'd be partly right. But that explanation has a problem. It doesn't account for the specificity. Why that hour? Why not 1 a.m. or 5 a.m.? Why does 3 a.m. feel categorically different to 11 p.m., even though 11 p.m. is also dark and also quiet? The circadian rhythm has an answer for this too, and it's a strange one. Around 3 a.m., your core body temperature hits its lowest point. Cortisol, the alertness hormone, is at its daily minimum. Your body is, in every physiological sense, as far from waking as it gets while technically still being alive. You are, at 3 a.m., at maximum biological distance from ordinary consciousness. And something in the human nervous system, across every culture that has ever documented it, experiences that biological liminal space and reports it as meaningful, as sacred or dangerous or electric, depending on the framework available. The framework changes, the feeling doesn't. Here is a thing cities do that we mostly don't notice. During the day, they reflect us back at ourselves. The streets are shaped by human decisions. The buildings exist because humans put them there. The noise is human noise. And because it's everywhere and constant, you stop seeing it as a reflection. It becomes wallpaper. The city disappears into itself. At 3 a.m., the humans are largely gone, but their structures remain. The architecture is still there. The streetlights, the roads, the signage for shops that are closed. The whole apparatus of human civilization, running at minimum power, ticking over, waiting. And this is where it gets strange. When the evidence of human presence exists without the humans, something in the brain reads it differently. Not as background, as intention, as trace. The empty parking lot isn't a parking lot anymore. It's the memory of 10,000 cars. The locked shop window isn't a window. It's a decision someone made, a livelihood someone is maintaining, a whole life implied in a padlock and a hand-lettered sign. The city at 3 a.m. doesn't have less human meaning in it. It has the same amount of human meaning, compressed into negative space. And negative space, in every visual art tradition ever developed, reads as weight, as presence, as the shape of something that was there. We built cities to be together. At 3 a.m., you can feel that that's what they're for. During the day, you're too busy being together to notice it.